Hi, this is Davis Gaines. Welcome to a brief overview of Chaikin Analytics. In Chaikin Analytics, every stock has a page. We're looking at the page for Boeing right now. Boeing is part of the Aerospace and Defense group on Chaikin, and clicking the I for those companies you're not familiar with give you a quick blurb about the company and the industry it operates in. On the right side of the screen are some basic fundamentals, the kind you'd get from anything, a high-end system like Reuters or Bloomberg, down to Yahoo Finance or Money from Microsoft. Long-term debt equity, price-to-book ratio, give you some earnings and earnings estimates information, price information, and some very basic fundamental information on the industry. The most important aspect of Chaikin Analytics is the power gauge rating. Every stock is rated somewhere between very bullish, neutral, bearish, and very bearish. Every stock of all 5,000 we cover has one of those 5 ratings. They're built on a multi-factor model based on 4 groups of factors: financial metrics, earnings performance, price volume or technicals, and expert opinions, what we would call our secret sauce as part of the model. For each of these, you can drill into the model and take a look at the 5 factors that make up that group, and note the slider somewhere from being very bullish all the way in the green to very bearish all the way in the red, which will give a rating of that stock for the group, and the 4 groups ratings together make up, in this case, a bullish rating for Boeing. Now keep in mind, every stock we rate is done so on a relative basis. So even if every stock in the entire market is going down, there would still be very bullish stocks because our expectation is that they will outperform the other stocks in the universe. Below the power gauge rating is a price chart and some analytics. So the price chart for Boeing with an upper and lower band and a 200-day moving average, that brown line, and I'll come back to signals, but any signals that have been triggered will pop out, in this case a breakout buy pop today. And below that, 4 key analytics. 1, Chaikin money flow. Money flow indicates money flowing into or out of a stock, just like it sounds. Green is bullish, meaning there are more buyers than sellers. And you can see for Boeing, as it's made this nice price climb from the high 70s or 80 or so a year ago, all the way up to over $140 today, has been virtually non-stop green, meaning bullish money flow. The overbought, oversold indicator, which indicates a pattern that stocks typically trade in, with the upper band typically generating a downward price movement and then back up and back down and so on. It'll oscillate differently depending on how much money is flowing into a particular security at any point in time. And the third key analytic, relative strength. Again, not shown numerically, but is a heat map, with green being bullish and red being bearish. So the relative strength of Boeing compared to its peers in the aerospace and certain other industries that are similar. And then finally, the ribbon on the bottom, the Chaikin power gauge over time. So this tells us on any particular date we want to look at exactly what the power gauge rating was, very bullish in this case on February 7th. And you can see it's been bullish or very bullish for the vast majority of the past year, except for this one point right here where it was neutral and a little bit back in early December. So this enables you to take a look at how a particular stock might work with Chaikin by just taking a look at what the power gauge said and how the stock performed. And keep in mind the power gauge is separate from these analytics, and typically when you're looking for winners or looking to pick stocks that might tank that you don't want in your portfolio or you might want to short, you're looking for the power gauge and the analytics to confirm one another. The third indicator we give you are the signals. The signals aren't necessarily times to buy or sell a stock unto themselves, but when you've decided to buy or sell something, we would consider these to be excellent entry or exit points. So right now, if you're a buyer in Boeing or thinking about it, a signal triggered a breakout buy. It's broken out of its typical price movement. And if you were looking to buy the stock, this indicator might indicate now is a good time to do so. Now at the same time, we have all of these indicators on a single stock basis. On the left side of the screen is where we have all our list information. Right now, I'm looking at one of the user lists, my own, and these are stocks that I've been following. The stocks are ranked by their power gauge rating. Everything on Chaikin is essentially looked at through the lens of the power gauge. So the rating, very bullish, down to bullish. And if I scroll on the scroll bar and go down to the bottom of my list, I'll find some bearish and very bearish stocks. And for stocks that don't have enough data, we typically need at least 6 months of data in order to put a power gauge rating on a stock. They'll be indicated with none. I can also rank my list by symbol. So if I'm looking at a big list like the S&P 500 and I just want to find a stock or even my own list, that's an easy way to find it. And I can take a look and see if any signals have been triggered and rank the list by signal. On top is what we call our power bar. In my list, my portfolio in effect, there are 16 bullish stocks, 14 neutral, and 4 bearish. The little bell is a symbol that allows me to bring up any alerts that have occurred in the past couple of days on my portfolio. I'll get 2 types of alerts, both bulls and bears. First, I'll get technical signals that have been triggered, like an oversold buy or the breakout buy we looked at in Boeing. It occurred on Monday the 18th, or yesterday, at that price. And then further down, I'll get one of 3 other types of alerts. An earnings surprise. In this case, Best Buy gave a negative earnings surprise today. We can take a look and see what that did to the stock. Down down 4.78, or over 10% with that earnings surprise on the downside. And we also get any power gauges that have turned bullish or bearish. So JP Morgan yesterday turned bullish. The third type, which I don't see right here, would be an earnings revision. When an analyst has revised his or her earnings estimate for a particular stock enough to move the consensus earnings estimate by 2 cents or more. And then if I click bearish alerts, I'll get the same sort of alerts. In fact, here's an estimate revision right here that are negative rather than positive. And I would stress these buy and sell bullish and bearish alerts are not necessarily Chaikin telling you buy or sell a stock. They're simply pieces of information that are particularly important as you consider whether or not you want to own a stock. Now the list manager allows me to put as many lists as I want in my user list. We also have industry groups. You can do top-down analysis or bottom-up analysis using Chaikin. If I want to take a look at all of the industries currently, and these will include all 5,000 of our stocks, I can rank them by power gauge. So I'm looking at the apparel industry as the #1 ranked industry group, 20 bullish stocks, 14 neutral and none bearish, 5 bullish, 4 neutral and no bearish in consumer electronics, and so on all the way down this list of industry groups till I go to the bottom and I get the other end. I'll get something like oil and gas with 20 bearish, 19 neutral, and 3 bullish stocks. And these indicators make it very easy to take a look at any particular industry group and get a feel for how that group has been performing. And if you were in Best Buy, which is in the non-food retail wholesale group, and you decide you don't want to be it anymore after today's news, clicking on non-food retail wholesale will bring that group up here, again sorted by power gauge, and it'll let me take a look through and see if I can find another name I might rather own than Best Buy. And I can scroll through those and take a look at something like Ingram Micro, which has a very bullish rating, or any one of a couple of dozen other stocks, 4 dozen in this case, that have bullish ratings. I can also take a look at not just industry groups, but indices. We have a few indices, including the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100, the OEX, and the Dow 30. And again, for each of these we show you the power bar, and we let you sort and screen for that particular indice in a list format, taking a look at alerts, signals, or simply ranking the stocks by power gauge rating. And finally, we provide Chaikin hot lists. Chaikin hot lists are curated lists that we think might make your job easier if you're looking for particular types of stocks. Large cap bulls are just what they sound like, large cap stocks that have a bullish rating. There are currently 38 of them. 4 of them have moved to neutral since Sunday when we put the list together. Recent bulls allow you to follow some of the recent bulls that have been part of that list to see if they're still bullish, or in some cases some might be turning bearish. Recent downside surprises are those names that recently came out with an earnings surprise on the downside. We'll see Best Buy there soon. Upcoming earnings ideas are stocks that have earnings coming out. That might give you an idea if you want to buy something that's very bullish. It's more likely that it'll surprise on the upside, while bearish stocks are more likely to surprise on the downside. Dividend stocks, all stocks that have triggered a signal over the past 48 hours. Recent upside surprises, recent bears, and this week's large cap bears. And that about has it for the day-to-day list and single stock functionality. The one other thing to look at are research reports. Every one of our 5,000 stocks has a research report created each night. This essentially is a plain English version of what we looked at on that front screen. It talks about the power gauge, it talks about why a particular stock by factor and by group is bullish or very bullish, and gives you a little more data than we put on that front page. It'll also talk about the technicals, and then it'll summarize some of its competitors in that group, show you some news headlines that have been triggered for that group recently, a little more on the earnings side and analysts and estimate revision summary, and finally a little bit about the company itself, including simple things like the website, name and address, employee information. Again, generic information any company could be found on fairly easily. The other report that's interesting, and let's go back to take a look at a user list, is what we call Portfolio Health Check. Portfolio Health Check allows you to look at any portfolio, or in effect a list of stocks, through the lens of the power gauge. This is a wonderful way to keep your eye on your portfolio very quickly and make sure that you're keeping your eye on any names that might be set to hurt your portfolio performance. In this case, my portfolio is ranked as strong, with almost half of my stocks likely to outperform the market over the next 3 to 6 months. It gives me a review. This report is generated Sunday night, by the way, so the review in effect is the previous week, even if we look at it today, Tuesday, I'm making this video. So it gives me the gainers from the previous week, the 3 largest, and losers, the 3 largest. And I'll touch on what the S&P did to give me a benchmark. Power gauge alerts that were triggered on the bullish side or the bearish side. Earnings surprises that occurred last week in my portfolio, revisions that occurred last week in my portfolio, and you'll see what the current power gauge of any of the names we talk about is. Also is what we call the Chaikin Power Grid. This is a very powerful and quick way to look at your portfolio, essentially lining up weak groups on the y-axis and weak stocks on the x-axis. Any stocks down here, like SPG, are weak stocks in weak groups. And those are the names that, unless you're very confident of, you might want to think about getting out of your portfolio. Up here, we've got some weak stocks in strong groups. And here is where we'd like to see our stocks. They're in both a strong group, and the stocks themselves are doing well with respect to relative performance. For those stocks that are on the left side of our grid, where appropriate, we'll offer you a swap. So Tesla could be swapped for General Motors. Typically, we're looking at something similar in market cap and in the same industry group for a swap. If we don't have one we think is appropriate, we'll just write no substitute. And in the same vein, group swaps, weak groups for stronger groups. And finally, a little bit of a review. First, news sentiment, which indicates of the stories that have been coming out on particular companies, whether they tend to be more positive or in this case more negative. Tesla, for example, was disappointing, as was Lululemon recently, so there have been quite a few negative stories on those companies. And then a pure review of how your portfolio did the previous week in terms of percentage up or down. And that, in essence, is your quick tour of Chaikin Analytics.